In this video, I will explain Power BI and how to do data cleaning, how to do formatting and transformation functions, and then model making, that's establishing a relationship, especially when your data is spread over multiple files or in multiple sheets. And in this topic, we will also discuss the role of primary keys and foreign keys. For the first part, that's data transformation, I'll be using warehouse data and we will upload it. And again, as I mentioned earlier, that although you can load it, but the best practice is always to transform data because that gives you more options and an opportunity to see if there are any missing rows in data or extra additional redundant columns in data, or to transform date to experiment with different formats of dates. Now in this case, for instance, we have in the first column we need to give it a name. Let's say we call it date, names, and unique identity. Now the next step is that in this date column we see date is there plus time is also there, and we want to separate them out. So first thing I will do is that I will make another column, a duplicate column for this one, and I would name this column as hours because that's one variable that's of our interest. And this column we change it to date, change type to date, and hours have been taken away from this one. And this column I want to transform into hours, transform hours and hours, which mean just hours. So for instance, any any activity that's carried from 0 to 12:59 a.m. in the morning time, it will be considered as 0 hour, and then 1 a.m. afterward 1 hour. In positions column, I would like to split them job and supervisor because there is a possibility that there can be different values for each. Job can be a separate variable and supervisor can be a separate variable. Although in this data we have only job supervisor as one variable, but one possibility could be that it could be online job or physical job, and it could be supervisor or employee, manager, or anything. So we would like to split this into job and position. So for this purpose, click on split column, and by delimiter this data has been separated by hyphens, and so hyphen appears here. So we click OK, and as you can see, they have been separated. Job appears in a separate column and supervisor appears in a separate column. Now the next thing is to give them separate names. Once these changes are made, then it's very important to click on close and apply to make sure that these changes actually apply. And once you click on close and apply, Power BI will take a few seconds. Once these changes have been made, then if you want to make additional changes, then click on home and transform data to make additional changes. For instance, in this hours column, I want to change hours into text. And the reason is that because we have one question that asks about making a line graph whereby time, that's hours, is on x-axis and productivity of employees or unique ID count of employees, that's on y variable. And Power BI will have a tendency to sum up these numbers, and as you can also see here, it appears here 1 2 3, which means it's number. And because our objective is to make a line graph whereby we do not want to sum these hours, but we want to appear them separate, hour 1, hour 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So therefore we will transform it into text variable, change type into text, and as you can see, now it has been converted into ABC, which means it's alphabetic. Again, close and apply to make sure that all these changes become actually applicable. For example, we have one question that is about determining productivity of employees at different hours, and we want to see that at what hour employees are most productive. So for this purpose, we will need to make a line chart, and we will need two variables for that. One is employee, one is hours, and other will be count of their unique identity. So I drag hours into axis and unique ID into values, and that will give this line chart, which shows that employees are, if I click on focus view, focus mode, it shows that employees are most productive at 0 hour in the beginning, and it appears that their productivity decreases later on. Similarly, there is one question that asks about at what hour a particular employee is most productive, and for that we use slicer function. Slicer function enables us to refine the view and see the performance by applying certain filters. So in this slicer I want to use names, so I will drag names either directly into this one or into field. Okay. Let's say here is Paula, and we want to see Paula is productive at what hours, she's most productive at what hours, and this graph shows that Paula is most productive at 8 hours. Similarly, another employee, Grant, is most productive at 7 hours. And once I uncheck this one, then it will show us the overall performance, and it shows that overall employees are most productive at 0 hours. Slicer is a useful function because it provides us a refined view of variables of our interest. Next, we will be using data that's about university employees data, and that data will be used for relationship building and model building and data cleaning. In this part of video, I will discuss how to clean data in Power BI and also how to make models. So for this data that's about university employees data, there are 3 sheets and we need to import all of them. As I mentioned earlier, that although you can load, but the best practice is to transform data, because as we can also see here that there are some empty rows that appear as null, 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 and there might be empty rows in other sheets as well, and we need to fix them. So therefore always click on transform data. Power BI will take a few seconds. As you can see, this data needs cleaning. This is payroll data, and first row is empty. It does not has any values, and we need to remove that. So for that purpose, click on remove rows and remove top rows, because there's only one row that needs to be deleted. So we enter 1 as number of rows and then click OK. That row will be deleted, and the next thing is that we want to promote this row as header row. So for that purpose, click on this one, use first row as header, and that becomes header, which means labels appear in that one. Other than that, everything is okay in this file. There are no extra rows, no extra columns. Now click on department, and in department again we see the same problem. There are 2 rows that are at the top that need to be removed. So we remove those rows, and also click on use first row as header. Okay, and this one is much better. There is no blank row, no blank column. Now click on the last one, that's demographics. In demographics, again there's one row that's blank, so also delete this one. Remove rows, one row from the top, and also use first row as header row. After these changes, our data is clean, and as you can see here, there are no extra columns, no extra rows in all these 3 sheets, in department and in payroll. And now it's very important to click on close and apply, so that these changes they actually take place. Power BI will take a few seconds. Once this data has been uploaded into Power BI, now on extreme left side at the top we have report and then data, and over here that's about model making. So let's go on model making, and Power BI has AI built in it, and it can automatically detect a relationship. So for instance, in this case, Power BI has automatically detected and made a relationship. So for instance, when I click on this one, it shows that it has made relationship between employee ID and employee ID. And same thing here, when I click on this one, it shows these employee ID in demographics and employee ID in departments. They are highlighted, which mean a relationship between these variables have been established. It's very important to check the accuracy, the correctness of this relationship, because sometimes Power BI does make mistakes, and it might make a wrong relationship. So if you find that a relationship is wrong and does not make sense and needs to be corrected, so then just right click on that and delete that relationship. Delete relationship. Okay, so this relationship would be deleted, and if we also want to delete this relationship, again click on delete relationship. Now if you want to remake this relationship, then drag the variable from one sheet to another one. So for example, I want to establish a relationship between employee ID and employee ID. So you can drag either from here to here or here to here. So I drag employee ID and bring them in place of employee ID, and it will establish a relationship between them. Now I can check this relationship, although when I just bring cursor on this one, it highlights employee ID and employee ID, which means that's a correct relationship. And you can also double click or click on properties, and it shows that in payroll data there is employee ID that has been highlighted as gray, and in demographics there is employee ID, and there is a relationship between them, and it's like this is a relationship, and this relationship is active. We can also let's make it one-to-one relationship. With one-to-one it gives an error, so let's keep many-to-one relationship, and this relationship is active. Okay. And in the same way, we will also establish a relationship between employee ID in departments and employee ID in demographics. So I drag employee ID from demographics into employee ID in department category, and it would make a relationship. When I double click this one, it shows that employee ID in demographics and employee ID in department, a relationship has been established between them, and this relationship is active.